Hi, this is Faith, and you are watching The Faith Factor. Holla.
All right. Hello. This is Faith, and you are watching The Faith Factor. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm trying to see if I could actually listen to this on my headset and actually speak on this with my headset. So I was looking in the settings here, and I was just trying to figure it all out. I'm up here late, Insomniac. I'm on Insomniac time, y'all. So I'm going to talk to y'all basically about some things that's been on my mind until I get ready to carry my behind to sleep, because I do have to get up early in the morning. So let me know how the audio sounds. It says here that my headset is working. I got it on wired headset mode. So hopefully I got it on the right mode. Yes, indeed. What's up, Tia? I see Tia is the first person that made it in. And let me go ahead, girl, and give you your round of applause for being here. I really appreciate it. Because Lord knows, ain't too many of us night owls up in here. I'm just gonna be honest. Thank you so much, Tia. Yeah, I was hoping that the audio would sound better because when I try to do it on the speakerphone, it's kind of choppy sometimes. So people I definitely appreciate when you give me feedback about the audio, anything that you see that needs improvement. Hey, let me know. I am not above changing things. So, look, y'all, I wanted to come here and have this conversation with you guys because I was over at Amiri's channel earlier today, and he did an amazing stream, a really good breakdown of the Moan Hunter report again. And like I said, I had done a breakdown of that report. And, we got to talking about a lot of the gripes that Black men in the space have had with Black women using this report. And so the conversation veered off into they want traditional women. They don't like the modern women. Modern women are the problem. And so I thought about that and how they're always saying that they need us to be more like the traditional women of the 1950s and the 1960s. And so, in thinking about that, I thought to myself, well, which traditional woman are they talking about? Are they talking about traditional Black women of the 50s and 60s? Or are they talking about traditional white women of the 50s and 60s? And see, this is a very, very pertinent question. Oh, but Tia, it is possible for us to be like the traditional Black women of the 50s and 60s. Matter of fact, we are actually still the prototype. And I'm going to explain that to you in just a minute here because, see, a lot of people don't realize that you got to pay attention to wordplay, and then you also have to pay attention to the time frame that these men are talking about. And if you know your history, if you really know your history, you'll know that Black women of the 50s and 60s, we had a different existence than other women. That's right. Tia come through. She said Black women always had to be the provider and protectors since we were brought into this country. Exactly. Because, see, if you think about even going all the way back to slavery, Black women were made to be the head of our households on those plantations. And I couldn't really think as to why that was, but then I began to think, okay, during slavery, they here in the United States treated us like chattel. They bred the women and they worked the hell out of the men. What's up, Joe W? What you doing up? What they bred the women and they worked the hell out of the men. So if the men, if their value was in being bred as bucks, they're the ones that go and they get the women pregnant, and their value is mostly in the work that they do. Then if the man becomes old and he gets to the point where he can no longer work, he's not of much value to that slave owner anymore. So that's the reason why here in the United States they could break up slave families, because they would just sell the men off. But plenty of times they kept a lot of the women slaves on the plantations, because who else was going to be the ones helping to take care of all those children slaves? And so with them constantly taking the men out of the household, selling them off, they deferred to the black woman as being the head of the slave household. Exactly, Tia. We never got to relax and take the weight of the world off our shoulders due to our men not stepping up for centuries, even thousands of years. They worked black women just as hard. Sorry. Yeah, and I hear you, Tia. I hear you. And we are rightfully so upset about it, because black men have not made it any better by coming online and saying things about black women that just aren't true. Like saying that black women of the 50s and 60s were these docile housewives, and that's just not true. That's just not true. Hi, BMT. Anyway, so where was I going with this? Black women back in the 50s and 60s were doing the same thing as black women are doing now. They were still getting their education. Back in the 50s and 60s, black women went to college. They got their education. There was more black women graduating from high school than black men. More black women attending trade school than black men. Black men's education actually stopped at around the 5th or 6th grade. So black women are doing the same thing back then that we're doing now. We were always out excelling and overachieving our counterparts. And it was systematically set up that way because we were given more opportunities. But when I hear black men crying about them wanting us to be more like our grandmothers and great grandmothers, my answer to them is we are more like our grandmothers and great grandmothers because they had to work too. So once again, I say the same thing that I said when I first came in here. Which traditional women are black men referring to when they're saying that they want us to be more like the traditional women of the 50s and 60s? Because they can't be talking about black women from what they're describing. They're talking about white women. And now, when I was reading that Moynihan report the other day, something that stood out to me. What's up, all things, Nata Jean? I haven't seen you in a minute. Yes, I am up late, girl, with this intellectual babble. But holla, holla. Thank you so much, sis, for the $5 super chat. I'm going to start using my branding. every single time, y'all. I done found a new toy. Thank you, all things out of Jean. Appreciate you. But let me go back to what I was banging on. So let me get back to that. They want us to be more traditional, like our so-called mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers. But we are the exact prototype of our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers that we came from, because they too were educated, they too worked, they too excelled, and they too were placed in positions of authority. And it was systematic, yes, but they went ahead and did what they had to do. Black women have been doing what they had to do for centuries. But now, like I was saying, now I'm back on my thought. With that Moynihan report, they were saying that white men that grew up as little boys, they always had a living, breathing example of a white man, whether their father was in the home or not in the home. They always had a living, breathing example in their environment of other white men getting up early, going to work, and providing for their families. And so it was just expected that most white men would do this. But on the flip side, black boys didn't get that same example on a regular and consistent basis in their environment. In our environment growing up, we mostly saw our mothers taking care of business in the household, whether we had a father there or not. So those were our examples for a long period of time, even back in the 50s and 60s. And so instead of black boys seeing their fathers getting up, going to work, and taking care of business for the family, they still saw the woman as the head and matriarch of the household. So what happens? The little black girls grow up and they see their mothers working and taking care of everything and providing for the family. And so we've always had this lopsided dynamic even since before the emancipation. So see, I keep trying to tell people that black men are getting black women confused. Black men are getting black women confused with white women. Because see, while black girls grew up watching their mothers going to school, working, taking care of business for the family, white women saw their mothers taking care of the household, being provided for. And if she did have to work, she didn't have to work that hard. So the traditional women that most of these black men are referring to are not even black women. What's up, Miss China White? Where you been? I love you right back, sis. I love you right back. Tia M says, question is, what are these good black men doing about improving the factual numbers and setting examples? White women got to rest in their feet, not black women. Exactly. And this is not to say that white women didn't suffer back then either, because white men did have their foot on their neck. They did. This is the reason why we had women's suffrage back then. But see, while everybody's still in Kevin Samuels' talking points and running off into the sunset with them after his death, and even before his death, nobody bothered to look back in history at these so-called traditional women that he's referring to. Nobody. The traditional women that these men are referring to are not black women. They're getting us confused with white women. White men created an environment where their women could rest on their laurels and be feminine and be pampered and cared for, not black men. And systematic oppression made it so that our men didn't have a lot of opportunities so that they could take their rightful place as head of the household. But it did give us a lot of opportunities that they were not trying to give to black men. And once again, it's not going to hurt me to say that because that's what happened. See, if we start telling history exactly the way history actually happened and leave our personal agendas out of it, I think that this gender war would not be raging on the way it is. But you got some people that just want to hold on to their agendas because it's, makes some money. I'm just going to be honest. There is no money in finding the solution. So nobody's going to point any of this out to you. We've always had an issue with lopsided gender roles in our community. And this was even when we first hit American soil, because it was made that way. And now for them, a lot of the black men that complain that if black women had not taken those jobs, if black women had not taken those opportunities, a lot of these black men say if we didn't take the jobs and just let them go and get the jobs, then things would have been different. This is what they think. But just think about what I'm telling you for a minute so that you can process it. If black women were systematically put in position to be head over black men in our household on purpose, even if we said that, hey, I'm not going to go out here and take this job in this office, or take this job as a housekeeper, or take this job as a teacher or a nurse, they were not going to give it to black men. And they made that painfully obvious. So even if black women turned down those jobs, they were going to give it to everybody but you, because that's how they wanted it. So as a group, we either were going to sink or swim. Now, if you look at the history of Black Wall Street, there was a black man that owned a bunch of businesses, a bunch of buildings. It wasn't even a bunch of businesses, a bunch of buildings over there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And during that time, we couldn't even own anything without having the signature of a white person. So he owned 50% of those buildings, and the other half was owned by a white man. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, additionally, in addition to us not being able to own anything without the signature of a white person, because they wouldn't just give us loans. Black woman, we could not own anything without the signature of our husband. You see how shit rolled downhill. So even though they weren't giving you opportunities, but they were giving us opportunities, the law still said that Black women who were married had to have the signature of her husband in order to own anything, or the signature of a next to kin. What's up, Sexy Red TV? Tia says that's ridiculous. Our great grand and grandmas was positioned that traditionally women would do. We weren't taking construction maintenance jobs. I understand that, Tia. But this is what a lot of the brothers are running amok online saying without actually looking at the history. A lot of the jobs that Black women did back then that they're talking about we should not have taken were traditionally female role jobs. That's the reason why I said, even if we did not take those jobs, they were not going to give them to Black men. They just weren't going to do it. What's up? I am pretty damn gangster. All y'all up late. So, with this in mind, guys, because I don't want to stay up too late, but I had this on my mind, and I was like, before I go into my old woman Alzheimer's, because y'all, I'm getting old. I sit up and think of something brilliant, and then I'll turn around and say I'm going to do a live stream about it and forget it. So I said I'm going to come on here while it's on my mind. I might do a little bit more expanded content on what I'm saying tonight. Right, to you. Men did traditional labor jobs, exactly. And whatever the white male labor jobs that were out during that time, they did have a Black male version of those traditional male oriented jobs. They did. But would they give them to Black men is the question. And the answer is always no. They have systematically always tried to keep Black men from making money. So if you think of the times, guys, like I said, it was amazing that we were able to have that block of land in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that we now know as Black Wall Street. And like I said, that Black man owned 50% of those buildings there, along with the white man that helped him get the loan. But when that white man died, his portion of the businesses went to a white woman. And she tried to get him to sell his half for pennies on the dollar. And she didn't want to acknowledge him because he was Black. So these are the systematic oppressions that we had to deal with back then, as far as land ownership or ownership of anything or starting businesses. Like I said, it was amazing that we were able to do it in the first place, but it wasn't easy. And that brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about, because I was over at BMT's channel and a certain snowman was there, and he wanted to talk to me about how white people problems and black people problems are the same. And he didn't want me to bring up any of these systematic oppressions that was very instrumental in holding us back for hundreds of years. He didn't want me to mention about slavery that we never got reparations for. He didn't want me to mention about Jim Crow laws, segregation laws, outright discrimination. He didn't want me to talk about any of those things, because all of that helped put us in the position where we are today. Like I said, black men could not even own anything, get loans or nothing without the signature of a white man. Exactly, Tia. Even the poor whites have more privilege than blacks, and that they're not in a better place right now today in 2022. It's generally because they're just, how can I say, lazy, because they have had every advantage. Every advantage. Now, I can at least point to 10 different things as to the reason why we're slowly, slowly gravitating to the top. We don't have nearly as many of the crutches that our grandmothers, grandfathers, great grandmothers, and great grandfathers had to deal with today. But it sure did take a toll on us. We're just now able to say, okay, the playing field is starting to level out a little bit, but it's not quite all the way level even in 2022. We're still dealing with a lot of systematic oppressions that need to be changed, reformed, however you want to call it. We're still dealing with it. So our problems are always going to be different and very unique than any other group in this country. Tia also says black women weren't traditionally allowed to become lawyers, as there were black men over 100 years old, 100 years ago. That was exactly. And that's the other thing. Women had very few rights. I wish I could find that picture of my great great grandmother. Let me see if I can find a picture of her on my phone. My great great grandmother, and I just got this picture from my mother. Let's see, is it here? Um, 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 um. But she was a beautiful woman, and I see a lot of myself in her. But my great great grandmother on my mom's side, she was a very rich black woman who was educated, and she also had her own business. So this is the reason why, when black men talk about the traditional woman, my great great grandmother was college educated and she had her own money. So ladies, when guys, come with that talking point, you can just, happily smile and tell them, hey, I am the traditional 1950, 1960 black woman. You got me mixed up with that white woman. Let's see if I can find that banner. No, 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 that's not what I'm looking for. Hold on. Oh, here's my grandma right here. All right, so I'm uploading a picture. There she is. That's my great grandmother. Yep, that's my great grandmother, Grandma Kilpatrick on my mom's side. And for the times, if you can look at her clothing and some of the clothing that the women in the background was wearing, but she was well-to-do black woman during that time. She had her own business. She was college educated. So, there were black women during that time that were doing the exact same thing, the exact same thing as black women are doing right now today. Right now today. Thank you, Tia. Yeah, that was the first time. Actually the only picture I have of my great grandmother. I never saw her before. So, I'm very proud of that picture. I'm very proud to know that this is part of my legacy and my background. So it lets me know, that the resilience and the resourcefulness that I have within me, well, that's something that's ingrained. My great grandmother was a very resilient, very resourceful woman and very smart. So definitely proud. So ladies, don't let anybody shame you, for your being resilient, for your being resourceful, and for you being able to hold it together. If black men um, are not in a position that they want to be in, they have nobody to look at or blame but themselves. Now, of course, we can say, yeah, there's some things that held them back. But black women, in spite of being in the position that we were in, we were still able to push forward. And I must say, it had to be very difficult. Now, also back during those times, because you have to look at the timeline here. Divorces were different for men than it was for women. Men could get a divorce, but women could not initiate divorce. The only time that a woman could possibly initiate a divorce, and she had to pay a lot of money, and as if she had the money, as if she was deserted, or she would, if her husband passed, she would be a widow, but that's the only way she would be a free woman, free to marry again. So imagine if you're poor back then and your husband deserts you. Well, now you're not even free to marry another man if you so happen to meet another man. So even if your husband deserted you and you could prove that he deserted you, now you have to come up with the money, because divorce was very expensive back then. Very expensive. So what a lot of these women were left to do, the ones that were deserted, if they met someone else, they just started families with them. And whatever children they had with these other men, they were deemed illegitimate. That's something else that we don't talk about. We don't talk about how the desertion affected the black woman as far as her being able to move forward with her life and with other people. And then just think about it. Now he's running around free, and whatever woman he gets with, he can't truly make her a wife. The only thing he can do is make her a baby mama, because he left his first family. He did not leave his first family in the correct way by giving that woman a divorce. So now both of them are running around creating other families and creating illegitimate children. So, black men have done, quite a bit of damage. And this is even back then. And like I said, divorce was very, very expensive. But if he's not divorcing her, and if he's moving on and she's moving on, whatever people they're getting with, they're creating more baby mamas and more illegitimate children as a result of the black man. Because once again, the woman would have no choice. The laws would not allow her to seek divorce a lot of times on her own. So, when we're running around here and we're, spewing these talking points without thinking, because we have a lot of people just saying stuff without thinking. Make sure you go back into the history and make sure you get the full round table story. And here's another reason that abandonment or desertion or the poor man's divorce, which is abandonment, hurt families. Now, that picture that I showed you of my grandmother, she had a business and she was college educated. So much so that she was married to a man prior to having my grandmother. My great great grandmother died when my grandmother was only 2 years old. So my grandmother never really knew her own mother. Her and my aunt Cora have different fathers. And it's exactly how I said it happened, but how I just explained to you. Now, my great great grandmother, she had money and she was married to a man. Now that man, he abandoned her. He left, and because he abandoned her, my great great grandmother had a very difficult time seeking divorce, and she was already with another man not long after he left. So when she conceived my grandmother was born illegitimate out of wedlock. So when she died 2 years later, because of my grandmother being born to a man that didn't have any holes or ties to her business, and because my grandmother's sister Cora was still just a little young girl, white people took my grandmother's business because it was a white person that signed the business over to my grandmother's husband that deserted. So, this is how shit rolled downhill and how a lot of our businesses transferred over into white people's hands as well. That desertion did a lot of damage, guys. Did a whole lot of damage. And like I said, somebody needs to really do the full history lesson of how that happened. But I was just up tonight and I wanted to come in and I wanted to talk to you all about that. And just, get it off my chest, because I know with me having the brain farts and the Alzheimer's, because I'm getting old. Thank you so much, Shine Right. And I meant to acknowledge your comment earlier today. I saw you said, faith factor, why you have to be so sexy. I appreciate that, sis. I appreciate it. But I wanted to get that off just so that you all can know the full depth of what happened to us. Because, like I said, it's a deep rabbit hole. It's not just as simple as reading the Moynihan report. You have to go outside of that and also look at history. So, just to recap, Black women are the 2022 prototype of the traditional women of the 50s and 60s. We are the traditional prototype of Black women during the 50s and 60s. And Black men have to stop getting us confused with white women. Desertion did a lot of harm to Black families and Black businesses. And with that, guys, I'm going to take my behind to bed. It is 11:30 out here in Phoenix. Hell, where you guys are at is probably even later. So I really appreciate all of you coming in, tuning in, listening to me with my late night babble. And with that, I just have to give all of you the smooches. Peace. And I am out of here. Bye, guys.